Well, I'd like to welcome two good friends of mine, Lisa Steyer and Mark Carver, both fine actors, both of whom are here today to help with the reading of this play.
So, Dan, why did you write this play?
Well, with this little situation that I've been going through, I decided that I wanted to read some biographies of people who had to be very resilient. And so I came upon some wonderful books about baseball legends. And the first three that I read were all by Charles Alexander, a very distinguished historian, and he wrote about Ty Cobb, Rogers Hornsby, and Tris Speaker. And they all played, of course, in the early part of the last century, all Hall of Famers. And then I read a wonderful biography of Josh Gibson, the great Negro League player. And then I came upon Joe Jackson. And everything I read about Joe suggested that a play could be built around him. And so that's kind of how this evolved.
Mm-hmm. So in the future, where do you see, what's the future of this play? Where do you see it going?
Well, the first step will be to bring it to college campuses. The play addresses issues such as race, illiteracy, Joe was illiterate, justice, redemption, aging, labor. And so the plan is to hold the play on day one, and then on day two to have a symposium where the students come and we talk about the issues. Mm-hmm. So that'll be the start of it, and then we'll see where it goes.
Great. Thanks a lot.
So should we get into the play?
Let's do this.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Well, by June of 1908, it became open and shut that two major league teams, the Boston Red Sox and the Philadelphia Athletics, they both want to sign me. So I go to Katie's daddy, John. I ask for her hand, and he say yes. And well, we've been happily married for 35 years, which ain't bad out of 43. Katie hate that joke, so I don't tell her when she around. Now, we ain't never had no children. It ain't because we didn't want to. In fact, we both love children. But Katie, she stick with me through the good and the bad. And there sure be a lot of the bad. But you know, on that summer Sunday in July 1908, all we could see was good. You see, in the mail earlier that week come a letter from the Philly Athletics signed by Mr. Connie Mack himself.
I'm Katie Jackson, and I will never forget the day that letter arrived from Mr. Mack. Joe had me read it to him. Mr. Mack wrote that he wanted Joe to join the Philadelphia Athletics as soon as the Spinners' season ended in September. I only saw Joe cry twice in his life. The first time was when I finished reading him the letter, and his tears, well, as you can imagine, they were tears of joy. The second time was 4 years ago on Christmas Eve. I'm sorry, but both of us still have a hard time talking about what happened.
Well, it weren't long before the word get out that the Philadelphia Athletics paid $900 to the Spinners for my rights. Deal called for me to report to Philadelphia right after the Spinners season end on September the 5. Now, being honest, and even though I'd be home run happy about going to the big leagues, the notion of going north, well, it'd be keeping me up at the nighttime. You see, I keep hearing about how northern folk look down their noses at us southerners. Remember now, this was 1908, and the Civil War was still festering in the minds of many, both in the north and the south. Anyhow, day before I set to leave, I stopped by the Harrison Drug Store, the place where folk meet year-round to talk baseball. In fact, in the winter, the Harrison Drug Store, with its big old pot-bellied stove, it'd be the most popular hot stove leave in Greenville. Now, you mark my words. Them televisions everybody be getting these days, they gonna ruin the hot stove league. Ruin all of them great winter baseball conversations. A damn shame in my view. Well, anyhow, on this September afternoon, I order my normal dope and lime. That'd be Coca-Cola and lime. Soon as I sat down, everyone in the drugstore come by to wish me luck, telling me how proud they is that one of Greenville's own be playing for the great Connie Mack. All of this backslapping, it make me keep thinking about how in the world I'm going to get along in a big northern city surrounded by northern teammates.
It wasn't ready. This was a southern boy who looked at Philadelphia as a foreign country. I was worried. But it was the big leagues, and no one from the village ever dreamed of anything like this happening. So everyone expected Joey to simply head north and make us proud.
Well, Mr. Mack, he get wind of my concern, so he send his chief scout all the way to Greenville to make sure I get on the train with him back to Philadelphia. I say yes, but when the train stop in Charlotte, I sneak off and head back to Greenville. Well, when I don't show up in Philadelphia, Mr. Mack, he send Sock Seabold, his injured right fielder. He send him down to Greenville to talk me onto the train. And wouldn't you know, the newspapers get hold of all of this and start to calling it Jackson's game a hide-and-seek with Mack. Eventually, Sox get me back on the train, but when I finally get to Philadelphia, well, it'd be worse than I ever could imagine. Whole problem had nothing to do with Mr. Mack. In fact, as I look back, I appreciate more and more his patience with me. Now, part of the problem was with all the talk about me not showing up and this coming right after the scouts be saying I'd be the next great player in the major leagues and all the press fuss up. It was just too much. And when I do show up in Philly in September and when I don't hit so good, well, everything kind of explode in my mind. First thing you should know is that the players on the club, all of them Northerners, they was right mean to me. Ain't no other way to say it. They resent all the attention I get. Soon as I find out, or soon as they find out that I can't read, they be calling me Brainless Joe instead of Shoeless Joe. Far as the writers, they even worse. Writing things that caused the fans to turn on me, too. Near every story was about me being stupid. But a couple of weeks after this, I had feelings so raw that I take the train again back to Greenville.
Scoop just brought this up a few minutes ago, but I'll say more. Joe Jackson was the most sensitive man I have ever known. And this early experience in the majors, well, it was so negative, it would shape him forever.
Now, this time when I sneaked back to Greenville, Mr. Mack, he got no choice but to suspend me for the rest of the 19-8 season. For the following 2 years, figuring I need more seasoning in the South, he assigned me to play for Savannah, the minor league club, and that worked out well. And then Mr. Mack moved me up to the New Orleans Pelicans, which worked out even better. In the summer of 1910, I hit real good in New Orleans, so good that the writers over there began to call me the next Ty Cobb. But I guess more and more Mr. Mack see that I just ain't a good fit in Philadelphia. So he began talking to Mr. Charlie Summers, owner of the Cleveland Naps. Before I know it, in August of 1910, Mr. Mack decided to trade me to Cleveland.
Yes, I did trade Joe to Cleveland. You know, some 10 years back in 1941, when Ted Williams hit .406, a writer asked me if I wished I had a Ted Williams on my Philadelphia Athletics ball club. I said to the writer, "Do I wish I had a Ted Williams? Well, sir, I once had a Ted Williams. His name was Joe Jackson, and I let him get away." It was my biggest mistake. You see, I didn't fully comprehend how difficult it was for Joe to adjust to living in the North. And I also didn't do enough to prevent my other ball players from disparaging Joe. And for that, I feel guilty. Late in his career, Ty Cobb came over to play for me. Despite his reputation for being difficult, I liked Ty, and he helped me understand much better what it was like for the ball players from the South to be in the majors. I only wish Ty had played for me earlier. He would have helped me better understand Joe. And can you imagine a lineup that included Ty Cobb and Joe Jackson? You know, I think the two most natural hitters I've ever seen are Joe Jackson and Ted Williams. And isn't it ironic that they are perhaps the two most vilified ball players by the media in the history of our game? For different reasons, to be sure. For Ted, it's his temper. But for Joe, it was all about his being illiterate. You know, another mistake I made was not pushing him harder to learn to read and write. Oh, I tried, but Joe just wouldn't hear of it. You'll hear from Joe about the Black Sox scandal. For my money, knowing quite a bit about it, if Joe had a good lawyer, well, I'll let him tell you. But in my view, he was much more the victim, much more sinned against than sinned. And as for the way he hit, his famous blue darters, I'll say it this way. Joe Jackson struck the ball like no other player, and his line drives demanded just that type of metaphor.
So, thank you both. That's a little bit of an idea of where this play is going to go. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.